Good evening, everybody. My name is Ahrens, and I'm the assistant curator at the Foxfire Museum and Heritage Center located in Mountain City, Georgia. So maybe some of you remember the name or recognize that monochromatic book cover, worn and dusty on your parents' shelf, right? Yeah. So Foxfire is an anthology of books. It's a magazine with national distribution. It's a museum. It's a student-centered program, and it's also a movement to preserve and promote Appalachian heritage. So Foxfire began in 1966 in Rabun Gap, Georgia, which is about 2 hours south of here. And for those of you who don't know, Asheville sits in the heart of Southern Appalachia, a region which extends into the northeast Georgia mountains where Foxfire is located. So this group of high school students and their English teacher decided to put together a magazine that would document the culture around them in Appalachia. So they went out and conducted oral history interviews and started putting these into articles. The magazines later became a book, which has now sold over 9 million copies worldwide. And we still have students from Rabun County coming together every summer to put out a magazine each year. In 1972, the Foxfire students decided to use the royalties from the first Foxfire book to purchase a tract of land in Mountain City, Georgia, which is just a little bit south of Rabun Gap. They used this land to rehabilitate historic buildings. They collected these buildings from the surrounding area and reconstructed them on the property. This is now our museum, and we have over 20 buildings that you can come and walk through. So at this point, you're probably thinking, okay, Foxfire's a book and it's a museum, but it's so much more. Foxfire really captures the continuum of history. The thing about history is that it's not a fixed marker in time. It's not a series of static events with clear cause and effect. History is fluid and each moment shapes the next, and we really try to capture that at Foxfire and raise awareness of how this can influence identity constructs and relationships within the community. We like to say that we bridge generations, and that is honestly the best way to put it. We connect current communities with their rich past and open them to these opportunities to explore traditions that otherwise would have been lost if these high schoolers hadn't just gone out and talked to people. So we also try to capture the present. We send our high school students out to talk to people who are working in these traditions now, Appalachians who are taking traditions and reviving them and revising them and placing them in a modern context. For example, in the 1970s, students captured stories of Appalachian foodways, including churning butter, preserving your own meat. And this way, they got to engage with experiential learning. They even got to process a hog and went through the entire process from scalding it to butchering it to curing the meat. And this allowed students who shopped at a supermarket to really delve into their history, but also to just realize where their food comes from. We still have students today participating in activities like this, but they're not quite going as deep as this. They're going out and talking to restaurateurs and farmers and putting those things into magazines and sharing them with everyone. So with the current social and political climate, we find ourselves in a really unique position, one that's shared by most heritage organizations, and that is that we are common ground. We share and possess an objective view of the past and present and provide a space for dissenting groups or different generations to come together and share in that past. So lifestyles of the past also provide valuable lessons for the present, especially in tolerance and compassion. Take Maud Shope and her mule Frank. She believed that, quote, "I just think everybody's got his way of feeling. You've got your way, and if you think you're right at doing something, well, you're just as honest as I am because you're doing what you think is right. I think that's right in letting the other man have his privilege," end quote. Maud Shope lived a fairly isolated life, and yet she still held these tenets in her heart. Appalachians are incredibly rooted in place. The mountains here sculpt their identity and connect these communities and allow these people to build relationships and share in a heritage. That identity is changing and growing to include new or marginalized voices, but it's always traced back to the past. Foxfire preserves this past and allows opportunities for people both within the Appalachian region and from outside to engage with it. This approach to history can have a broader impact, though. As most of you probably know, Appalachians have often been misrepresented by the media. We can combat these negative stereotypes by digging into our archives and bringing out these voices of these people who lived in the mountains and let them speak for themselves. We can also highlight disparities in the historical record and highlight these areas that have been looked over in the mainstream narrative. We can bring to light the experiences of the Cherokee and the African Americans who lived in this mountain, who are often left out of that historical record. So we really challenge our students and our visitors to re-examine the historical narrative and to engage with a more accurate, richer narrative that recognizes this multiplicity of voices. And we do this through engaging with material culture, through oral history interviews, and through heritage activities. Experiential learning is an incredibly powerful tool that can be used to engage history on a new level. So how might we do this in a practical sense? It's a bit tall order to fill. So we're constantly exploring and experimenting with this. We currently have a self-guided tour through the museum in addition to the other things I've already mentioned, but we are working on installing new exhibit panels and redesigning our exhibits. We're also implementing an app that will provide a layered multimedia experience for visitors to the museum to engage with. But most importantly, we bring in people. So we have all these great additions to our interpretation, but it's still a museum with the silent buildings and silent artifacts. And so we bring in students and craftspeople and active artists to breathe life into this space and to communicate that idea of a continuum. We're very unique because we can offer opportunities to people like blacksmiths and a weaver and a broom maker, people who are actively practicing these trades and can share that with the people who come and visit, but also that our students can learn from it and carry it into their own future and spread it through their own communities. But most importantly, we do this so that we don't practice living history as it's traditionally known. We bring in these active artists, as I've mentioned, not reenactors, and they are able to demonstrate how history is carried into the future and how traditions are perpetuated and evolved, and just how it might be able to transform our future and our communities. Thank you.